Coming at you with a little bonus action this week. Actually, I got some big news. But first, in case you found yourself in this location, you're not sure how you got here, this is Why Libertarian. My name is Matt. Usually we're on Tuesday nights at 5. It's Thursday, obviously. It's 7 o'clock. We got a special episode for you. But huge news. Next week, I am this is a cliff, like a precipice I've been looking out over the edge of for a while. We're going 5 nights a week. Every single night of the week, Monday through Friday, 7 p.m., we're going to try and load it up with guests, a ton of different content, decentralization, liberty, just every freaking night. Just at least an hour of liberty every freaking night, so you can come here, get some awesome information. We got some awesome guests lined up. It's going to be out of freaking sight. I feel like a hippie. It's out of sight, man. So anyway, as usual, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, get it out there. I got notification. We are in the process of downloading to Odyssey as I speak right now. So if you like to view videos on Odyssey, we are on there. If you do want to see any of the other channels or media outlets that we are on, this is my link tree. It's pretty simple. It's just Linktree and then /Y Libertarian, but you can see all the outlets. We are adding them as we go. There will actually be a number of Hive-based links on there eventually once I get everything kind of synced up and squared away on that. I've been messing around with that a lot. So that was a lot of news, a lot of stuff to be talked about. We actually have a guest, so I might as well kind of bring him on and discuss some just really powerful stuff that we've been talking about for a long time. This is a word that's been on a lot of people's tongues, and it's going to continue to be. We are talking about the remnant, okay? Remember that word or that phrase, the remnant. This is a big freaking deal. It's been percolating for a long time now, and it's actually coming to the forefront. I am proud to have with me Diego Rivera, an original Jersey badass Liberty guy, I've heard. Is that true?
That's true, man. That's true.
What part of Jersey here? We got to figure this out first.
North Bergen and Hudson County.
Actual New Jersey. That's fantastic. Not Philadelphia East down there in the South. No.
That's right. Rufo's gonna get pissed on that one.
Yeah. Well, we could also get into an argument over whether or not there's a Central Jersey or not, but
That's not up for debate. That's not. I don't care what Jon Stewart says. You know.
Yeah. The hell does he know anyway? Yeah. Besides brainwashing, apparently, if you read psychology papers. So anyone who doesn't know you, isn't familiar with you, just kind of give them a quick, 1-minute synopsis. Who are you, and kind of how did you come to the Liberty movement?
Well, funny enough, I came through it through comedy. I used to watch a show called Tough Crowd, and I'd always see them complaining about censorship and how they couldn't say what was on their mind. But it was refreshing to watch these people that are from our neck of the woods speak honestly. And as you watch people start to talk on eggshells, you start to go like, wait, something's not right here. Like, why are people so scared of words? They're just mouth noises. Like, what's the big deal? And then from there, I read a book called Shadow University by Harvey Silverglade and Charles Kors, and then Greg Lukianoff. And I just went down the rabbit hole. Next thing you know, there's a guy called Ron Paul, and there's a guy called Rand Paul that's does a filibuster, and I watched the entire thing, and I was like, I'm in. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, it's in.
You were hooked.
That's it.
Now,
yeah, man.
wait, what's your family's background? I heard, what is it,
Yeah.
Cuban heritage?
Yeah. So I'm first generation American, but my family's all from Cuba. They're all refugees.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
how does that factor into your and maybe, your family's, if you can speak to that, your family's kind of perspective on,
Right.
America and just what's going on right now?
Right. So, yeah, that's funny because, there's a lot of things like you can come out gay, trans, whatever. You can identify as a Zer or whatever the fuck you want to a Cuban family. But if you come out of the closet and say that you're a Democrat, I mean, you're fucked.
Yeah.
That's so,
That's interesting.
yeah. So, the parents are Republican because they think that that's the side of liberty. And I do believe that there are liberty Republicans that are fantastic out there. But they still have to get a hold of the principles, but they take to those principles really easy, like really easy. So normally there's a huge skepticism of state. And, when I think about this later, so it's funny because my biological father's considered a terrorist from the Cuban government, which is okay. Like, that's a good government to be considered a terrorist for, because
Yeah, right.
they try to kill, Castro a bunch of times. And so you kind of start getting that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, you know?
So you have a little bit of shit stirrer in your genetics, is what you're saying.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. All right. So what pulled you away from? You're in Texas right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What pulled you away from Jersey? What kind of compelled the move?
I mean, essentially, like I did want to leave the motherland. I love it. I love the people. Like, I feel like we're good stock. You know what I mean? Like, we're still one of the last people that'll just tell you go fuck yourself out of love.
Yeah.
Where everybody else is, they tell you to go fuck yourself by saying, "Oh, bless your heart." It's like, you're not saying what you mean.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's a little dishonest. So I love the people. Like, to me, like, everything, Jersey people, all of it. I just love the culture. I love the people. But essentially, I'm a political refugee as well. You just had to get the hell out of there. Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah, it's and this will kind of go to the heart of what we're talking about here, but like, politics just by itself is really difficult to kind of like steer the ship, right? Like turn the Titanic. It's like it's near impossible. Like it's marginally possible. It's near impossible.
Right.
But what we're facing in New Jersey, I mean, you faced it firsthand. It is just top to bottom a cultural shift, a pendulum that has gone from being one of the revolutionary states to now being a state that looks more, akin to, a Democrat socialist or a socialist kind of country. And it's really unnerving. I mean, like, you drive by places that, Washington's headquarters and things like that, and you're like, wow, like, where are those people? Like, they're all dead and gone, but I mean, like, where are their descendants? They probably moved to Texas. I don't know.
Yeah. They're not there anymore. Yeah, and like, that's what's cool is, like, I used to live within walking distance of where Alexander Hamilton died, and I took that as a badge of honor.
Yeah. Yeah, perpetual debt. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's the greatest idea ever.
I just don't get it. Like New Jersey people are pretty counterculture. We're pretty innovative. Like I just think honestly, it's what happened is that it's the same thing that happened in Brooklyn, right? Like Brooklyn now looks like a ski slope. Everybody's blonde, blue eyed, but back in the day, that's not the case. And then same thing, and like people moved to New York, right?
Yeah,
So everybody moved to New York from Wisconsin or whatever, and like they're like, well, I hate it here. It's nothing but ranches and Republicans, and so they moved over to New York City. They made it even worse.
yeah,
Then they had to move to Jersey. Dave Smith's a political refugee over in New Jersey, so it's like, yeah. Then they moved there, but at least Dave Smith has the right ideas. But a
yeah,
lot of them don't, and then they start changing the culture. Then they do the same thing there that they did to Virginia. Like Northeast Virginia dominates Virginia, and
yeah.
Virginia screwed.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
and
what happened.
you look like kind of like an entertainment person, at least from the stuff that's in the background behind you.
Yeah.
So maybe this reference won't be lost on you. I mean, they are essentially the aliens from Independence Day. Like that's exactly what they are. They
Right.
just go from planet to planet or state to state and just kind of like suck all the resources out of it and then move on to the next place.
That's
Um, Good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you're absolutely right. Like when Kristen Tate put out that book that said democratic migration might be more deadly to us than immigrants themselves. Like she
Mm,
wasn't kidding. Like if you look at Arizona, Nevada, Maine, New Hampshire, like they just come into your state and they're like parasites. They ruin everything. And that's not to say that Republicans are good, but God, are the Democrats just so horrible?
yes. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that because we also have it's like a perfect storm, right? You have a situation where you have Democrats that are now fleeing the cities and moving to suburban and rural America, which in many cases many of these used to be bastions of conservative thinking and conservative politics, and so
Right.
they're beginning to change that just en masse. The other problem that you've had is you've had a dare I say pussification of the conservative and the right wing opposition to the more progressivist ideas. Um, from your take, what does that really come from?
Oh boy, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean we have an hour, so like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can take as
So
much time as you want.
I think, well, let me just try to dissect it, and we'll go back and just review that big part. But I think the pussification part, at least we can address that. Um, I think there's something. Well, there's culturally they're trying to defang us. They don't
Hmm,
want men to be men anymore. They want men to
it's true.
be women. I mean, this is what's appreciated in this culture is I don't mean pound your chest and howl at the moon when I say be a man, but I
Yep.
do mean that you don't walk around apologizing for things you didn't do. You just speak honestly. If you slip up, you say, "Okay, I'm sorry." This is more of just like it seems like the beta male takeover is just using the veil of all of these good things that no one would disagree with, right?
Yep.
But using that as a cudgel, and that's the problem is that they're using these things to essentially beat the male out of men.
Yep.
And I think this is why libertarians also do well. I mean, I can go into this for just a minute if you'll let me
Go
land
for
this
it.
thought. But so Jonathan Haidt, you know the name, right?
Yep.
Right. So, and this is what's also beautiful about our movement, and even he says it. He finds it funny, but we find it funny for different reasons. So essentially, Jonathan Haidt did works on people's political and religious thinking, and he wanted to see why people were so divided,
Mhm.
right? And essentially, he took work from not Sasha, Simon Baron Cohen, Borat's cousin, actually, where he's a neuroscientist that essentially studies autism, right?
Mhm.
And so what he found was is using his study and his studies here of Jonathan Haidt using Simon Baron Cohen's work, right, which is what he calls autism the super male brain, right? In the
Okay.
sense that they're geared more towards systemizing. They look at complex problems and systems. They tend to be engineers or mathematicians. They do, they enjoy playing chess or looking at a subway map and understanding it. Like it's more about, you know, those people are more interested in systems than in people,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So he took that and he did a study, and essentially he had, conservatives and progressives or liberals, right? And so, he found that, progressives tend to be the most feminine style of thinking. And that just means less geared towards systemizing, more geared towards empathizing, right?
Hmm.
But he left a group out there because there was this group that just didn't make sense. He has over 20,000 data points on this one group that just doesn't make sense to him. So he added a category for libertarians. And when he
Okay.
did that, he found exactly what he thought they might find, is that they're, conservatives essentially, there was essentially five moral taste buds. It was, harm, care, equality.
Hmm.
They looked at that differently, right? And then there was in-group thinking, purity, and I forget the other one, but it's something. So conservatives across the board shared all five. Liberals only shared the first two, but there was this group that didn't make sense, and so he added libertarian, and he found exactly this. They don't have any. They across the board are lower on all five, but when he added liberty as a moral taste bud, shot way up, way
Yeah.
more than any liberal or way more than any Republican. When it came to personal liberty, when it came to economic liberty, they scored way higher. But he also found that libertarians have the most masculine style of thinking, which means we tend to be systematic and not empathetic, which might go into a messaging problem that we definitely have. But so he tells libertarians, he's like, essentially, you're the smartest, you have the most rational style of thinking, very logical,
Yeah.
but you're very cold-hearted.
Yeah.
And when he tells libertarians this, they laugh. They
Yeah.
laugh. And so he finds it funny because we're laughing, and we find it funny because we know it's true.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's 100%. And I think Jordan Peterson, I think, also kind of talks about that matrix a bit. And when he gets probed about, gender differences and gender roles and things like that. And yeah, no, I think that's true. I think it holds, again, like at the extremes. Sometimes it breaks down a little bit, but just in general, I think that's a good kind of interpretation. And I think Republicans are suffering from the framework that they're almost kind of like they're it's that Overton window dynamic. It's like they have to continue to chase votes as opposed to chase culture, right? So
Right.
a long time ago, the more progressive, I won't even call them Democrats, I'll just call them the more progressive wing, they decided to just focus solely on culture, right? And you had kind of these moderate Democrats for a while that like held the line because they pretty much knew those two sides were going to cancel each other out. And what they did was they worked underneath to kind of like undermine all these traditional values that both moderate Democrats and conservatives both kind of like shared in that crossover.
Yep.
And it took the better part of 50 years for them to be successful in doing this. But it's like, what's the phrase, like, gradual but all at once? Like, that's exactly what it was. It was like this just small kind of like undermining of culture until, a handful of years ago, it just kind of like exploded onto the scene.
Right.
But so that being said, let me talk about before we talk about like current events and stuff like that. Let me pitch so that people can find your information. The one place that they can go is IamTheRemnant.com, right?
Yep.
Okay. And that is essentially what? It's basically your home base for merch
Right.
and stuff like that?
Yeah. And so we're actually moving it over. Yeah, it is. There's merch. I'm trying to get more on there. Like I wanted to do an end the lockdown stuff. And we're switching websites as well. So because Squarespace demonetized me over the flag, so I can't
Unbelievable.
take debit or credit cards. So I'm just going to move it over to Bluehost and have them do it because I can't take a credit card. Like Stripe legitimately said, no, you can't. And it's like, why? I'm on record several times, before it was Counterflow, I was on Buck Johnson's show explaining that we're just peaceful revolutionaries, but we just mean it.
Yeah.
But we mean it. And that's the difference. And that scares people,
Yeah.
No, but yeah.
It's well to your point earlier, like the idea of being considered a terrorist by say like Cuba is a badge of honor. I think that a lot of people are beginning to wake up to the fact that if you're considered a terrorist or an insurrectionist by the current power structure in the United States, I think we're getting to that point. We're getting to that point where a lot of people are actually proud. They will wear that as a badge of courage, saying that they're defying kind of like the tyranny and the authoritarian direction that we're going in. How did you get turned on to just this idea of the remnant? Where did it really kind of like click for you, and why did it really kind of hit with you?
I was reading Real Descent, and just to show you, because I brought my receipts, I was reading Real Descent, and on chapter, what is it, 24? So I have it here. On chapter, I believe, yeah, it's 24. Yes, right here. I read that chapter, and it fucked me up more than any chapter in the book. Here, I read about this remnant that what Tom Woods was talking about, and I legitimately lost my mind. I was like, I went down that rabbit hole. I immediately went to go reading Isaiah's Job. Immediately went and just dove down that, because this made so much sense, right? Like this concept, like, and look, he signed it. I don't know if you can.
I can see it. Yep.
Yeah. So he signed that part of that book. I didn't want it in the front. I knew exactly where I wanted it. And I just dove it because it made sense. Like we're trying to, it's like Malice talks about these people as like they're trees, and like I tend to agree. Like we're not trying to change everybody, and if we just focus on the people that could be changed, we'd have a lot more results than if we're just going to like try this mass appeal and watering down this message. And it's like, no, the brave people, the early adopters, the truth tellers will be the ones that change.
Yeah. Well, and that's also the dynamic there is also one where you're kind of hedging your bet too, right? So like, for instance, if the wheels stay on the bus for long enough, if you're effective in kind of reaching out to the remnant and cultivating that group, it begins to grow and become a much bigger proportion of the population and actually affect some change, right? The hedging part is if it all, like for the collapsitarians out there that are about to like, get wildly, aroused, if it all falls down and it all goes boom, reaching out to the remnant means that those handful of people will be the ones that understand that the collapse is coming, and they will be able to front run it, right? Like they will be the ones that are self-sustaining. They'll be the ones that know to avoid currency so that they're not left destitute, and they actually have some purchasing power afterward. Like there's a whole laundry list of things, and so it kind of lives with. I try and explain this to people, and I'm wondering if you're kind of the same. I live with my foot in two worlds. My one foot is like, okay, I wouldn't have a problem being an agorist and just like separating myself from the systems that are currently exploiting and killing people and breaking down. Right. And then the other foot, I live in the realm of, all right, let's activate and save as many as we can. And you know what? In the process, if we're able to dismantle the system that's bound to destroy itself anyway, great. But if not, you still have like this kind of insurance policy. Does that make sense, or is that like do you think it's too dichotomous?
I think you can be both. I don't even think it's foot in two worlds. It's like you have to operate in a way that where you save your own skin, right? I mean, self-preservation is a real thing, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm glad that people are using crypto, and if we talk about decentralization later, I heard you talk about it at the front end, but crypto is decentralization. Now crypto is being talked about because why? Because it has it's infected people's ideas that it could be currency that could be used. And if it starts moving and people start exchanging it, it essentially is a hedge against the US dollar. And there's nothing wrong with that. And to go even further, printing guns instead of buying them from manufacturers is decentralization. Uber versus the cab monopolies is decentralization. So libertarians, by innovating, are actually proving ourselves more than we ever have on any debate stage, minus maybe the Ron Paul movement. But and then the other side is just like, this is what's so powerful about the story of Isaiah's Job. Is like essentially like you just have to not give a shit and tell people the truth, and people will take to that. And it's like Tom's way of saying it is like, when you burn the 3x5 card, people will get a whiff of the smoke and they will come running. And boy, do they, because I mean, I've changed hundreds of people's opinion on liberty, and it wasn't by being like, well, let me be a baby back bitch about it, or socially liberal and fiscally conservative. It's like, you're an idiot.
Yeah. That's like, let's kind of talk down that road for a little bit, and just kind of talk about that juxtaposition of people that want to focus on the remnant and these kind of the select, not the select few, but just the few that aren't the masses, right? Like the ones that are reachable, the ones that when you do reach them, they become ride or die, right? Like
Right.
that's the other thing. Like you're not trying to reach like a group of people that are like fair weather. You're reaching people that are disenfranchised, that are like F the system. And when you can reach them with something concrete, it just attracts them like a moth to a flame, right?
Yep.
The Libertarian Party over the last 10, 20 years, and I haven't been nearly as active as I have recently, but I've been watching from the periphery, they've taken the opposite path, right? They've taken the mass appeal path, the try and get as many votes as possible path. And I think that breaks down because, to your point, like the Gary Johnson kind of mantras is just so milquetoast that it doesn't shock anyone awake. Like no,
Right.
like I've yet to hear someone who said, like, I've heard people say that Ron Paul woke me up out of my sleep. Like I
Right.
was in the Matrix and he pulled me out of it. I've yet to hear anyone say that about Gary Johnson. I've heard people say that they were disenfranchised and Gary Johnson was like a nice alternative, and that's why they kind of
Right.
like gravitated in that direction. But
Yeah. That's
what's your thought on that?
That's very interesting because I have personal experience with this, and so I think that Gary Johnson will get people to identify as libertarian, but he won't get them to be good libertarians. Like for example, like I knew this. I pulled this one guy who I was hiring one time, and he said Gary Johnson pulled him to the movement. And then when I asked him what his top issues were, it was like gay marriage and civil asset forfeiture and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, civil asset forfeiture, legit. It's a solid issue, man. I mean, they stole more from people than the fucking burglars did. But if war isn't on there, then you don't fucking get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, do you understand that they bomb gay people? Like, does that
Yeah.
not like so? But when I talk to a Ron Pauler, they get it. It's like it's the finances, right? It's like empire and the bloodline of the empire. Like that's it. Everything else is second place.
So and this keeps coming up too, even amongst like shout out to Mike Rufo who hooked me and Diego up. Mike's awesome. He's the straw that stirs the drink here in New Jersey as far as like the liberty movement goes. He's absolutely fantastic. Mike and that crew of people that I'm a part of here in New Jersey. We have these conversations, and we have the same kind of I guess not disconnect, but just we come at those social issues from different sides. But one thing is always completely evident to me, and it's that those social issues begin to become de-emphasized once you take care of those other things, right? And it's not to mean that they're not important. Like gay marriage is important. Abortion is an important issue. Whatever, trans rights is an important issue. Immigration is an important issue. But the very difficult thing to get across to someone who came in who was a Gary Johnson libertarian or just one of these disaffected, left or right libertarians that came in is, look, if you take care of the Fed, war, the war on drugs, like it all gets like way less because, abortion 70% is caused by poverty. Right? And there's no bigger contributor to poverty than inflation and the Federal Reserve. That's it, hands down, right? Like, and the same thing, you can just go through each one of the other issues and just say, if we take care of these, like that problem is now 10% of what it is now. And the reason why is because that's a symptom. It's not the actual cause, what about like messaging? Like, do you identify, so like, are you like are you like an out libertarian, like a card-carrying member of the Libertarian Party, or would you just more kind of like? No, okay, so
no. But I identify as a Rothbardian, ANCAP, no added shit. Like that's who I am, and that's what I mean. And I don't care how the movement succeeds. I do love the Mises Caucus and the newly redacted caucus. Big fan of them.
yeah.
But as far as that, they're the only interesting thing about the Libertarian Party. The rest of those dudes are boring.
Yeah, well, and so that's the other thing is, so it sounds like if I had to ask you just like on the spot, what juices you up? Like if you have to think of a couple of names or a couple of topics, I know this idea of reaching the remnant is a big one, right? But
Yeah.
so like if I had to ask you for like your top 3 or 4 like people or things that really juices you up about the liberty movement, what would it be?
Well, I would say it's the Remnant. It's Tom Woods. Just the way that he manages to like slowly. He could be a comedian, I think, because he knows how to
Okay.
build up a story, and then when he hits the punchline, you're just like, "Fuck!" I
Yeah.
felt it in my bones.
Yeah.
His speech. When he gets to his speech at Mike Heist's event a couple years ago, I listened to that almost daily. I have
Yeah.
typed that up for Word. I just went and just typed it out and just typed up his speech because I've just loved it so much. When he starts talking about Walter Jones and penance, and like, here's the thing. So I'm a combat vet, right? And so every day I have to seek penance for
Mhm.
being on the wrong side of things. And so
Mhm.
I will do everything that I can for the rest of my days to try to make up for not getting the right take. Now, I can justify it and say, like, hey, I thought I was doing the right thing, but in the end, that still doesn't make it okay. And so I'm going to do everything that I can, understanding what I know now, to try to bring these home. Like you said earlier, we want to pull the captives home. We want to tell them, like, hey, Peterson talks about this idea that we want to be the dragon slayer. And that's why a lot of people's motivation tends to have them run to this because it's their version of being the knight in their own mythology. And
Right.
yes, if that was correct. So like the logic is good, but the premise is false in the sense that no, you're fighting for the dragon. You're fighting on the opposite side. You're on the wrong side of this. And once you put that in their heads, they're like, fuck, dude, I almost joined.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm really glad you didn't. Because
Yeah.
I want you here. I want you alive. You deserve to be here and alive.
Yeah.
Like don't do this. Don't fall prey to the same machine that it's okay. It's like I love what I heard Angela McArdle on that show, and she's like, we're not entering into good faith, conversations with people who bomb weddings and bail out Wall Street. And I was like, this chick gets it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that's how we have to do. So like I would say that war is a huge issue. Robert Higgs is my spirit animal. I love him so much
Yeah.
because he gets it right. He doesn't call it anything but what it is. When he writes an article, he'll put like siren song. Like he'll call it a death cult. That's exactly what it is, and we shouldn't have to like baby down these words to do it. So I'd say that that's probably two. And then honestly, for me, it's not. If we want to think like, yeah, I could say like Ron Paul. He's very motivational in what he did. But as far
That's
as
not
like,
the wrong answer. That's pretty good.
yeah, honestly, I think of like Ron Paul's an amazing story, but I think of like what what does more for me is like like Lenny Bruce or George Carlin or some of these people like Lenny Bruce spend most of his life suing the federal government because they kept arresting him for mouth noises.
Yeah.
That guy's done more for free speech than anybody.
Yeah.
Maybe given what was it, the Mormons or was it the Mormons? I don't know. But it was like a religious sect that essentially, sued the government because they refused to take pledge allegiance, and so they would go to the Supreme Court and sue them and win because why? Because they're fucking right.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people are in the same camp for me. It's like, if you can't like, words are consequences of your thoughts. And if you're
Mm.
telling me that I can't say what I want to say, you're essentially telling me I'm limited to my thoughts. And to
Yeah.
me, cognition is the greatest gift that evolution has ever given us. Right. And so if you're trying to tell me I can't think a certain way, that's the number one, like, fuck you, fuck your mother, and eat all of my ass, because I will not be told what to say.
No, that's awesome, and that's the right way to say that line. I'm pretty sure, like in the dictionary, it's written that way.
Yeah.
No,
It's Hitchens. It's like, pick a number, get in line, and kiss my ass. Like,
yes.
that's exactly what you should be told when you're like, no. Well, fuck you. I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm gonna say it louder now.
Yeah. I no, and that's the other thing. I think the voices that are coming forward now, they are of that mentality more so now than ever. I think even in Ron Paul's delivery, Ron Paul tried to be very respectable. He was obviously running in the Republican Party, so if he dropped an F-bomb, he immediately would have been canceled by the
Right.
religious conservatives that were in the group, or the evangelicals.
Right.
But the voices that are coming forward now are very much of that ilk, right? It's like, if you tell me I can't do something, not only am I going to do it, but just to like shove it in your face that I have the freedom to do this, I'm going to do it louder or more insane than I was doing it before, which I think is the complete legitimate response, because that the other person is trying to do the exact opposite. They're trying to mute whatever it is, your thought, your speech, your activity, your ability to defend yourself, your ability to make money and not having it stolen from you. Like, all of those things are all much greater trespasses than what they're alleging you are doing. And so if they try and call you on it, or like belittle you or stop you from doing it, the correct response is, yeah, and I'm going to crank that shit to 11. Like, because I'm going to throw it in your face and make you know that I can do this. And before, I was doing it nicely. I was doing it at 6. Now you're going to have to deal with it, right? Like, I truly believe, I understand a lot of people out there are non-confrontational and they want just everyone to get along. But you know what? Sometimes in a room, someone just needs to stand up and just say, fuck everybody, right? Like, there just has to be that one voice. So let's talk about some current events. So we had this shooting in Boulder, all right? And it painfully, I want to hear your opinion on this, because it comes out, first of all, I'm done with the identity politics stuff. So, like, oh, another white mass shooter, and it turns out to be a Syrian guy. Okay, but the proximity to Biden dropping bombs on supposedly Iranian-backed Syrian militia, and a Syrian guy shooting up innocent Americans in Boulder, Colorado, seems extremely close in time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it sure does. I mean, and there's a lot of things, right? And this is why, economics is so important, is because it's judging the unseen, right? And that these things have collateral, and that, this weird concept of blowback, right? And none of this ever seems to process in anybody's head. They're just like, oh, quick fix. And here's the thing. I don't even think that they think it's a quick fix. I just think that some might. There's two camps there. There's people that understand that you need to use these atrocities for power. And then there's the useful idiots that they manipulate and get to, essentially be the mouthpieces for all this horrible stuff. It's horrific that people had to die. And it's also horrific. Like, both things are tragedies. But, the main frame of this conversation, what's everybody's takeaway is, oh, let's debate guns. And it's like, we're done debating, man.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Because the political narrative isn't focused on what the actual problem is, right? Like, and so just immediately, almost like, it's funny that the left uses these kind of tactics, when truthfully, like, the truth of it is that it should actually be used against them, right? So, like, this idea that you take something that's completely unrelated to something else politically and try and marry them up for a political, to a political end or for political means that our conversation's over. You are no longer in the realm of rational thought. You're just trying to connect an awful thing and something you're trying to get done politically in order to get it over the finish line. You're a fucking demon for doing that, right?
Yeah, you're standing on the graves of these people to essentially push your shit.
Yes, yeah, and realistically, what they're doing though is they're telling you the opposite. And then they're trying to be like this double speak where it's like, oh, well, you obviously don't care about the bodies of these people. And you're like, what are you talking about, asshole? You're the one who's making a political statement about this. Literally, the bodies aren't cold yet. And they already had people talking about white shooter, take away AR-15s and all this other stuff. It was completely preposterous. But I find it really, like, painfully convenient, right? Like, that it's a Syrian shooter and we just dropped bombs on Syrian militia, like, and you know what? It'll come out in 6 months that he was like someone's cousin who was involved in that stuff over in Syria, and but it'll get buried. Like, the lead will get buried and you'll never hear about it.
Yeah, they have no intention of ever being honest, and like, that's the whole thing, is like, they're never going to be honest about. They're never going to put the right narrative out there and promote that. They're going to do what benefits them, and that's to take away your guns, because that's essentially how you take away people's ability to, essentially own themselves and live their life unmolested. It's like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like, if I can't shoot back, I'm pretty fucked, because you have a monopoly on violence.
Yeah. Dave Smith actually just yesterday had an episode that came out with, I keep forgetting his name. the dude from Liberty Lockout,
Okay.
Lockdown.
Yeah. I haven't
Crap, I
seen
haven't
that one
seen your
yet.
moment. But so they were talking about just that dynamic. You have people that like you saw it over the summer with like the BLM protests and stuff like that. Isn't it ironic that like when a bunch of people that didn't have any weapons, they got messed with by the police, but
Yeah.
then as soon as the Boog showed up and there was an armed support, like you didn't see that very much anymore. Like,
Right.
do people not connect those two things? I guess they don't because it doesn't fit the narrative that they're being fed from, whoever they think of as their, influencer or their, news source.
Yeah.
But that just goes to that heart of like the last 50 years. Like that's what they've been doing. They've been conditioning the mice for those exact responses. And it
Right.
almost doesn't matter what it is. Like it almost doesn't matter what it is anymore.
No, it doesn't. And they're not interested in they're not trying to find what's true. They're not interested in that, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
either they have it or they don't care what it is. And look, I just say you just have to Horton rule everybody in this scenario because everybody's fucking wrong, minus the libertarians that have been saying this shit forever and ever and ever and ever. And
Yeah.
it's like, wow, who could have called this? Oh yeah, a big group of people. And it's like, you just got to Horton rule them. And what I mean by this is like always attack the left from the left and the right from the right. Don't take people's identities away from them.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because you can say like this is a reality. Is like essentially if you're supporting gun control, then you are supporting the idea that men with guns get to show up at my house and take my property. And if I resist, because I will, right? They're going to jail me or kill me. So if
Yeah.
I die because of this, just know that the blood is on your hands. I want you to
Yeah.
understand that, right? And also, like, and again, you could just go back and be like, by the way, you don't give a shit about bombing these people. All of a sudden, you care about these people. How come? That seems very politically, convenient. So,
Yeah.
like, either way, just understand that the thing that you're putting forward is going to get me killed. You're about to make peaceful people criminals, and
Yeah.
guess what that means? You die or go to fucking jail. So congratulations, Mr. Criminal Justice Reform. I'm sure you're so proud of it, Mr. Lefty. And to the right, I go, who's going to take them? It's not
Mhm.
Nancy Pelosi. She's not getting kitted up. It's going to
Yeah.
be it's going to be a fucking law enforcement officer that kicks down your door, shoots your dog, and fucking buries you right there.
Yeah. And that law enforcement officer is a tool, right? And the law enforcement officer, and this isn't like in defense of them. I mean, they're human beings. They get to make their choices, but that's what they hold over their heads, right? Like, here's your livelihood. You get paid really good so that whenever we call you, you are our hired thug. And so
Right.
we tell you to go get them and you go get them, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
the answer. Which, I mean, there's not a ton of deductive reasoning that happens in law enforcement. I'm sorry,
No.
there just isn't. It's a lot of rote, procedure and process, and that's the way it's wanted. That's the way it's desired, so that there's no free thought involved in it.
Right.
But so that being said, like the beauty is the remnant. You can speak to it with truth, right? So like when things like this happen and you're like over the din, you have to yell because there is a din, but over the din, when you yell and you speak the truth, 98% of people are going to yell back at you and say that you're a conspiracy theorist or a crazy
Right.
person.
Yeah.
But that 2% of people, they're like, wait a minute, he just said exactly what I was thinking and I was afraid to say out loud, right?
Right.
Like, that's how you reach that component. Now, that being said, I don't think libertarians have done a good job of one, being loud, and two,
No.
being truthful enough. Like, and that just goes to that point of, look, sometimes like if someone's an asshole, sometimes you got to call them an asshole. Like you can't just
Right.
like sugarcoat it and sneak around it. In Texas, when the lockdowns came out, what was your first reaction? Wait, what? Not when they. Well, first when they came down, and now since they've been lifted.
Oh yeah, I immediately left. I said, there's one rule. It's like if they lock me down, I will leave, and I did. Sadly, I went to Kentucky, and that was not a better option. Who could have fucking seen that one happening? So then Kentucky went haywire, and then I went to Wyoming, right? And worked on some campaigns out there and stuff like that. And so I, was still paying my bills and stuff like that, but. I just went to Wyoming. Like the one thing I would refuse to do is to be in a place where they're going to lock me down. And when they tell me to wear a mask, like at the end, I was like, there is no place for me to go. But I immediately left. I said, I will leave when they lock me down. And if there's soldiers marching down the street, that's when I decide that I'm going to shoot. But I knew everybody has to have that defining line. It's like, what action are you willing to take when they make it? And I said,
Yeah.
for the lockdowns, you run. And then for when they start occupying, you start shooting back.
Yeah. Now,
because that's reality. Like, you have to make that choice. And I don't want to, you know?
Now, is it a lot of people were singing praises of your governor there in Texas when he pulled the lockdowns and all the restrictions off? What was your thought?
I wish I could have put like the little, little park lock that when you don't pay your tickets, the little boot that they put on your car. I wish I could have put that on his wheelchair. That fucking tyrant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Fuck that guy.
That would have been interesting to see. I put out something earlier today, and it was like, it's a sad state of affairs because Arizona just opened up too, like within the last few hours or whatever, maybe this morning. It's a sad state of affairs when you're looked at as this like messiah of freedom. And all you have to do is do the same authoritarian shit that everyone else does, but just, let up on the leash like moments before everyone else does. And all of a sudden you're like this great savior of freedom. It's ridiculous.
Texas, this is what I hate about Texas. This is why I will not be here in the long run, is because, and like, I live really close to downtown. Now, here's the thing. I don't mesh with these people. There's nothing that they or I, I'm not conservative in nature, but like, I'm more conservative than they are. You know what I mean? Yeah. At least, like, I just want personality. Like, I don't want to know you. You sound like you suck. Why do you have blue hair? You fucking look stupid. Yeah. Like, and that's okay. I'm not going to ever tell them. But, I mean, I don't want to talk to them. We don't mesh. Like, this isn't my culture. Like, this feels weird. Don't you feel weird? Why are you like this? And I just want to poke them and be like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. It's So it's and nobody hears from Texas anyway. It's just Californians that moved into Texas and they picked the blueberry and the tomato sauce, right? But Texas, they don't have constitutional carry. They have a police state, right? Mm-hmm. And these are things that you have to consider, right? Is that, like, one, they tried to put constitutional carry before a committee today. They pulled it. They pulled it today. Like, they don't even fucking mean it. Like, they're not serious.
We talk about this in New Jersey all the time because we have a bunch of FUDs in New Jersey. They're all a bunch of NRA, simps that, we have to do things calculated. And if we try and go too far, too fast, they'll take more of our rights. And the more militant about us are like, that's not the way fucking rights work, right? Like, that's not the answer is you try the nice way. And then if the nice way fails, you do it the mean way. Like, that's basically what happens. Right. So, but they don't share that. So what's the reaction? They pull it from committee, then what? We boo-hoo and then what? Vote harder next election cycle? Is that what it is?
I saw a pic. There was everybody from every liberty organization down at the Capitol today, whether it was RLC, whether it was libertarians. There was people pulling up with hundreds of thousands of petitions for this shit. And you know what they did? They said, fuck off. Right, and they did it right in your face. And Texas, rah rah, it's like the Yosemite Sam, like, cartoonish version of what you think freedom is. But it's like, you don't even support the basic right of self-preservation. Don't tell me how much you care about freedom. And, oh, by the way, didn't you lock everybody down in their homes for a year? I remember. So, like, a place like, honestly, like a place like Wyoming, or I've thought about even leaving the country, like just going somewhere else. Like, if you can make enough money, you can buy your way out of here.
Yeah. Well, it opened my eyes to an option that I hadn't thought about, and it was Mexico. Yes. But not like Mexico City, Mexico, like more kind of like out in cartel territory. Because speaking of decentralization, the guys from Three Speak, Matt and Dan, that I had on a little while back, that's blockchain version of YouTube. That's where they're holed up. They're holed up in Mexico, and they were like, you know what? Cartel leaders are a lot more sensible to deal with than government officials. Like, it's really easy. It just comes down to a number. Like, how much money to leave me alone?
And that's okay. I mean, like, I'm at least willing to do that if I understand it and we actually make contract. Like, hey, listen, I understand that you're kind of shady, but if you promise to leave me alone, like, if the government here gave me a number and they were like, all right, $100,000 will never bother you another day in your life, and I'll be like, here you go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Fuck right off. You know what I mean? I won't buy a house. Instead, what I'll do is I'll give him $100,000 and tell him to fuck right off and never bother me again. If that was the case, it's not. And so, like, Robert Higgs, who I mentioned was my spirit animal, he lives in Mexico. And I'm like, And then I've been watching The Nomad Capitalist for a while. And he's just like, go to where you're treated best. And how the fuck can you make the argument that you're treated best here?
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
It's
well, it's almost worse here because there is this illusion that you're going to get all this freedom and liberty and everything like that. But it's brutal because it's just an illusion, right? Like, it's not the truth. At least somewhere else where they're like, look, you can have as much freedom as you want, but this is the box. And you're like, okay, well, at least you're telling me up front, like, what the box is, right? Like, but it's almost like, it's like this sick form of, like, sadomasochism in this country, especially when it comes to, like, I would have to say that I probably rag on both sides equally, okay? But the one that gets me, like, gets under my skin the most is actually Republicans that will pay lip service to freedom and liberty and do absolutely nothing about it.
You're gonna love this then. Okay, so I'll give you what's funny. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But you got to understand that, like, you can't play their game. You have to find ways to smack them and then make them. And then when you smack them, you said, no, you smacked yourself. And they're like, oh, I smacked myself. Be like, yeah, you did it. And I'll give you a perfect example, right? So there was, and well, let's hope these committee members never see this. So Alan West was on Tim Pool's show.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, oh, shit. Because you know what Tim Pool does? He super chats things.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there jacked up on pre-workout outside of the gym, sending a fucking $100 super chat. Yeah. Right. And it says, according to the GOP platform of Texas, it says that without the congressional declaration of war, that the National Guard reserves the right to not go into active combat. I agree, Mr. West. It says, and so have 31 other states that have filed the Defend the Guard legislation. What are your thoughts? And so previously, because now I got him that it says he's on the party platform because he said, well, the reason we didn't, he goes, this was, to be fair, he said, this was before my time. I wasn't in yet, but I see the logic in the sense that the log cabin Republicans, the question before is like, okay, but why did you guys kick out the log cabin Republicans from the GOP? And it said, well, because we believe that it's in the party platform that says they believe in one man, one woman. And if you're against the party platform, then you're undermining the Republican Party. And just the very next question was Tim Pool asking my question. And now what the fuck does he do? Right. So either he didn't know what Defend the Guard Act was, or he had to just, deflect right away. So he goes, I believe we should defend the guard. But, what they're doing down in DC is very abusive with Biden stuff. But it's like, but I got you. And so I clipped it. And then we did a press release that says Colonel Alan West supports the Defend the Guard Act legislation.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
I'll send you that press release because it's also got the video that I clipped. So it's fucking wonderful because it's like it's clipped in a way where you're like, you're not going to be able to argue out of this. Right. Yeah. So it's like, stop don't play their games, like print fucking guns. You know what I mean? Like use crypto, like smack them whenever you can. Like it's time to stop being like, hello, good sir. Because they're going to fuck you anyway.
Well, that's my one response to, Massey is right there. He's so close. Yeah. Where, and he, he lives the kind of life that I think a lot of us, either do or strive to live, right? Like, outdoorsy, like, likes to get away from things, doesn't like people meddling in his business, that kind of thing. And he's come out with some stuff recently where, a lot of people are like, you know what? He's right on that verge of anarchism. Like, he's really close. There's some things he's not close on, but there's other things, like the lockdowns and, like, what you can do July 4th, right? And he comes out and he goes, look, despite whatever, the president says or whatever, you do whatever you need to do on July 4th, right? And then I was like, now do guns! Do guns next, right? Like, that's exactly the thought process. The problem is a lot of these kind of, like, beltway types, they push it, like, just a little bit, and then they pull it back in, right? So, like, you see a little bit of what they want to say, but then they kind of, like, pull it all back in so that they don't let everything out. We need people that are more, like, on the other side of that that are
Yeah.
like, no, don't let them say what to do July 4th. And by the way, on July 4th, print some guns, fire up the still, smoke a joint, like, whatever you need to do to have a good time,
Yeah.
So some folks might not be familiar with Defend the Guard. What is it, and is there a way for them to get more information about it?
Yeah, so they can go to defendtheguard.us. They can also go to bringourtroopshome.us, right? This is an organization that I think is doing the absolute best thing that they can. It's just a ragtag group of people that have done more than all these like fucking $1 million orgs that are trying to stop these wars. You know what I mean? There's really good ones out there, but then there's some really shitty ones too. And essentially what Defend the Guard is it's state legislation that essentially the 10th Amendment Center, Mike Meharry wrote this up, says, if Congress won't make an actual declaration of war, then the states refuse the right to deploy their National Guard. Yeah, so that's it right there. And you see in that picture, you'll see, legislators of all stripes sitting together, coming together to put forward this legislation, including Pat McGeehan, who is the original gangster of this bill. He put it forward in West Virginia 7 years ago, right? He got it out of committee 1 year, and then it never went anywhere. Then the next year, it goes for a vote. It's 50-50. Then COVID happens. Then this year, they voted against it because it was going to go to committee, or it wasn't going to go to committee, or it was, and they were going to kill it. So you try to do a parliamentary procedure, and it got voted down 28-78. Like, these people are monsters. But if you really want to scare the empire, you put forward this, because every time that we put forward this bill and it shows up in the House, shows up to testify against it, 2-star generals, Pentagon officials. This terrifies the shit out of them. And so it's not like I think that we're going to get this legislation passed. Maybe we can if we fight for 10 years. What I do like, though, is that it exposes the state. There is a cultural aspect to putting forward this bill because it scares the empire. And I like to, point out that, hey, the empire has no clothes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that aspect of it. I'm sure that they will try and stop this at every turn. Every single Republican, at the very least, the Republicans, any Democrats that say that they're for the troops or whatever, I try and introduce it, but that's a line of bullshit that they feed you. But every single Republican who's like for the troops and respect the troops and bring the troops home and stuff like that, I mention this to them every single time. The majority of them don't know about it. A handful of them do. So the biggest problem right now is just awareness, like make them all aware to it. But I love the idea of it. And the way I pitch it to them is I basically say, will you stop the President of the United States from sending our sons and daughters to another country to kill people and potentially get killed or wounded themselves if there is no formal declaration of war? If you do that in an open public arena, right, like you get this like humming, like, how am I going to answer that? Because half of them are fucking neocons, and half of them are in the pocket or waiting to be in the pocket of being a lobbyist for Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or one of the other ones. But at the very least, it shows, like, again, it's about the remnant. Like, 2 people in the room will be watching that back and forth and go, holy shit, I see what just happened. Right? Yep. Like, not everyone, but like 2 people will be like, wow, I see what you did there. That was pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's not about winning the debate. Well, it's about getting a hold of the audience. You know what I mean? Like, that's who matters most, right? You're not going to convince the other guy who's like pretty smart, knows his stuff, or at least is like super drugged up on his own bullshit, to where he's not going to agree with you anyway. But at least if you can get a hold of that audience, and that's the purpose of like being a loud and true like debater, is like you're trying to give these people the truth, and if they catch a glimpse of it, the right ones will be like, what do you mean when you said that? It's like, oh, here, let me show you. This is called Anatomy of the State. Drink.
Yes. Drink. It's 50 pages. You can go sit down in the bathroom and read it in about an hour and a half, and it will change your life.
Yeah, I just had a buddy tell me today. He was like, yeah, dude, I was in when you first gave me that book, I was like, oh my God. And then I gave it to another person, and it's been handed out. And now he's personally buying personal copies to hand out to other people.
Yeah.
So I gave him that book, and all of a sudden he was like, oh wow, fuck. oh, I didn't look at the world this way. Then he went down the rabbit hole and started reading Spooner, like Rothbard, obviously with Anatomy of the State, but before New Liberty, Ethics of Liberty and stuff. And so now he's down it. He's handing these copies out, and it's doing more than fucking anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's crazy is how this book was not written in the last 10 years, man. This has been knowledge it's been sitting around for, damn near 50 years, right? Like this is something that we knew way back when. Well, look, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to say thank you. I appreciate you taking the time out. Look, anyone who's an OG of Liberty who comes from New Jersey and somehow has the Liberty bug in you and it didn't get beaten out of you living in this state, I appreciate that. So I'm glad that we were able to link up, and we'll definitely have to try and do this again sometime. Again, what are the ways that people can get in touch with you or find more information?
Just go to I'm the Remnant, or also do yourself a favor, go to defendtheguard.us, click on your state. If you don't see that if it comes up empty, you can put forward this legislation to one of your legislators and say, hey, you need to put this forward. So we have the maps of like what states and who's filed it. So if you click on your state and people filed it, you go, all right, now let me fight for it. If there's nobody there, then you go up to your legislator and you grab them by the cuffs and you say, you're going to file this. You understand this? So that's a good way to do it. And just honestly, just tell the truth, talk loudly, and don't cower to these animals. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do not be ashamed of liberty. They will try and make you ashamed of your desire for freedom and to have your liberty. Do not back down. Yep. And awaken the damn remnant. Let's go. It's time. It's past time.
I'm about it.
All right. Have a good evening. Enjoy your night out there in Texas, and I'll see everyone next week, Monday through Friday. Let's go, 7 p.m.
Big. Awesome.
Have a good one.
You too.